This is my take on our case study in the educational psychology class. Um, so the context of this case study is that Miss Jackson has been teaching fifth grade for 10 years. Her students generally enjoy her lessons, and she has a good relationship with students, families, and administrators. Most colleagues agree that Miss Jackson is a very good teacher who takes her job seriously and cares deeply for her students. The only critique Miss Jackson's principal gives of the teacher's work is that Miss Jackson is a bit traditional in terms of her approach and teaching methods. Otherwise, the principal's recommendation for Miss Jackson is glowing. There is one subject that Miss Jackson struggles to teach in her fifth grade class, which is science. While Miss Jackson's class science scores are not necessarily low, they're not as high as scores in areas like language arts. Miss Jackson identifies the subject of science as her weak spot, claiming that I'm just not really a science person. Her principal has noticed the same informal observations and recommends that Miss Jackson should design a new unit focusing on a standard of learning strand of difficulty for her students. The principal also recommends that Miss Jackson try to incorporate student creative and critical thinking into the new unit. So Miss Jackson identifies the SOL strands related to sound waves. She does not like her lesson on this topic and has wanted to change them for a long time. The standard is pictured here. It's standard 5.2. It says the student will investigate and understand how sound is created and transmitted and how it is used. Key concepts include compression waves, vibration, compression, wavelength, frequency, amplitude, the ability of different media, solids, liquids, and gases to transmit sounds, and uses applications of sound waves. So the first question is, how could Miss Jackson identify her weaknesses in teaching science before starting this unit? So we learned in the context that Miss Jackson is a little bit traditional in her teaching style. So to me, that meant that we'd have to think more about cultural responsiveness, because traditionally that hasn't been thought about, or technology, or critical and creative thinking skills. So some of the questions that I've said that Ms. Jackson could ask herself is if her previous lesson incorporated student thinking, creative and critical thinking, and she can use the student's sensory memory to convert material to working memory by asking, does this activity grab students' attention, which would be using, give me just a second. Hold on. Sorry about this. There we go. So does the activity grab students' attention? Are we using what we know about memory, or a theory of memory, to convert sensory memory to working memory by grabbing students' attention? Some ways that she could grab students' attention is by asking really interesting, thought-provoking questions, like if a tree falls in the forest and there's no one around to hear it, will it make a sound? Sound can be a difficult concept to portray because the waves cannot be easily seen or touched. So what is sound and why do we care about it? And then like other questions like that get students immediately thinking and interested in the topic. The lesson plan that we use later uses a video to grab students' attention of a woman breaking a glass by singing, for us to think about sound waves. And then we can also use Piaget's theory of knowledge construction. So like, how do we teach that students assimilate and accommodate information and discover sound waves on their own, like using the concrete operational stage and having them use manipulatives and figuring out what happens. We also need to be making sure that we're scaffolding learning. So we have to have Ms. Jackson asking herself if there's enough scaffolding here, if she's using peer interaction in this lesson, and questioning students to help them through their thinking. We also want to ensure that we're thinking about proximal development or having a productive struggle. Are we looking at our students and making sure? And because like this isn't a terrible lesson plan, she's likely already thought about these things, but we want to build on what a productive struggle looks like and using peer involvement and thinking creatively and grabbing students' attention. And we have to think about, are her lessons culturally responsive or multicultural? That might be a weakness of hers as a more traditional teacher. And so there's ways that we can incorporate that into even our science lessons. And you want to make sure like you're motivating students. Like are you utilizing students' intrinsic motivation or by talking about things that they may already be interested, like music or basketball or whatever other myriad of things. They usually all involve sound and sound waves. So if we incorporate this creativity and critical thinking, we encourage a productive struggle, but we have to make sure that we're providing scaffolding. So these are the things that she should be looking for. So these were two resources that I found for a possible lesson or unit of lessons for Ms. Jackson that would both cover the SOL content and support creative and critical thinking. So these are the sound and waves discussion questions that I was talking about earlier, or discussion starters. So what's the difference between sound waves and light waves? How does sound travel? Why do we sound different when we hear our voices on a recording? And how can sound waves shatter or blast? So this is the video I was talking about earlier. And then, why is there no sound in space? So these things really provoke students' thought and gets them thinking about this unit. So they become intrinsically motivated to learn more, and they're thinking more about mastery than performance if they're trying and working to answer these questions. You even have a little science experiment called Straw Kazoo where students can learn about pitch, and the FET Lab interactive simulations, which are really helpful for allowing students to have physical manipulatives that go along with that concrete operational stage. And then the next resource that I have, hold on, is an entire lesson plan called the Do You Hear What I Hear lesson plan. So we're just going to go over some highlights from that. But this it's extremely in-depth and even uses students' cultural backgrounds and funds of knowledge to help them learn, which is a great multicultural and culturally responsive practice that Ms. Jackson could be thinking more about in order to more holistically teach her students. So even in this intro, it talks about combining music, science, and students' backgrounds. So here's some terms that you're going to teach, some vocabulary right here, and then how to start this lesson. Students can create data by using different instruments. So it has a breakdown of materials like tuning forks, the piano or guitar, drums, and a computer or a listening device like a CD player or MP3 player with external speakers, along with a variety of music CDs or MP3s. And so here the students observed what guitar looks like with different types of sounds and collected that data and created um, a diagram. And so here they're asked to think about their own cultural experiences. So they're thinking about their favorite music or a musical artist, and then they talk about their favorites. So everyone's learning about each other's cultures, and then you can use that to go off of and teach sound waves. So there's a tuning fork, a sound scoop, and you give students a chance to explore using these physical manipulatives that go along with the concrete operational phase, and they become intrinsically motivated by like talking about their own cultural backgrounds, and they're given that chance to explore on their own. And then through that exploration, we guide them through questions using that scaffolding that Piaget talked about. Um, so, like, why do you see waves with the tuning fork and water? How are the tuning fork and sound scoop similar? So, asking them to compare to really build those critical thinking skills. And then we'll ask them to elaborate. And then on the final day, so this can be a full unit, you have an evaluation where you assess student mastery. That was the goal out of all of this. Um, so they were given choice, so multiple ways to display their learning, which is a research-based practice that is differentiating educational outcomes so that or not educational outcomes, but differentiating assessment so students of all skill levels are able to show mastery. Um, and yeah, this is a really solid lesson plan. And I chose both articles because I believe that you should use more attention grabbing materials in conjunction with this lesson plan. And Ms. Jackson could really make this her own using both materials. Um, so how should Ms. Jackson determine whether or not her lesson was successful? She should use her assessments that create those rubrics for those assessments, like having students teach each other about sound waves, creating a diagram about sound waves, um, or answering a short answer test about sound waves. She should use those rubrics for assessment to determine student scores, and compare that data to previous years using and like her anecdotal data about like what she noticed about student attention, what she noticed about their motivation and their attitudes. And you can even use the student attitude survey to determine if that had a more positive influence on our students than in years past. And then how could Ms. Jackson take what she learned from this experience to become an even better teacher? She could use the tools found in this lesson in the future, like finding culturally responsive um, methods of teaching and lesson plans, and going to teacher blogs and seeing the resources that they found. And she can really think about getting creative about grabbing student interest, like using those videos or those essential thought-provoking questions. And then just to continue thinking about motivation, like what motivates our students, the things that they love and things that they care about. So relating the material in that way, like we exhibited in this lesson. So yeah, I hope this is what you're looking for, and thanks so much for watching.